heading into Week 16 of the fantasy football season. And finally, after a long Week 15 where we just had to wait and see what was going to happen and stuff, with all these players sick and games pushed back here, here's a few running backs I've looked ahead on the waiver wire. And a disclaimer as well, time recording this video, no one's on the COVID list and no one's injured. I got to announce it now pretty much before every video because every hour these things change here in the NFL with someone going on the COVID and safety protocols list. But right now, as the time is recording this video, all these guys are healthy and ready to go, it looks like. The first running back, Ronald Jones of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Ronald Jones here stepping in now for the injured Leonard Fournette, who's going to miss a few games with a hamstring injury. And they even signed Le'Veon Bell was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here. So if you didn't know about that or you want to hear my thoughts on the Le'Veon Bell signing, that video is up on the channel. So Ronald Jones here, the last couple seasons, he definitely got a lot of run for this Tampa Bay Buccaneer team. But this year, he's taken a backseat to Leonard Fournette, and rightfully so. What a season Fournette had, and he's a big loss for fantasy owners, no doubt about it. So Ronald Jones filling in for Fournette in the second half of that ball game in Week 15. 8 carries, 63 yards, and 2 catches for 8 yards. So right here, this Tampa Bay Buccaneer team's very banged up. Mike Evans is hurt. He's probably not going to play. Chris Godwin, he's out for the season, tearing the MCL, and he's a huge loss, no doubt about it. So Antonio Brown, where many people thought he was going to get cut, he has another chance now. Because Tampa Bay, they got no other options, really. They're not going to go with younger guys, and they got to go with the veterans here. So Ronald Jones, if you're in the Final Four and the semifinals in your fantasy league, 2 pretty juicy matchups, in my opinion. Week 16 at Carolina. I know on paper it's not a great matchup, but I think Jones could have a good ball game. And Week 17 at the Jets here, give up the most fantasy points to running backs. So right now, Jones, he's widely available in 63% of fantasy leagues. And if you're still hanging in there, he's going to be a crucial add, in my opinion, for the next few weeks. The next running back I looked at is Craig Reynolds of the Detroit Lions. So Craig Reynolds, I mentioned him last week as a waiver wire pickup. And he's been great in the 2 weeks here where he's got run is Reynolds here. I know Jamal Williams has come off the COVID list on Monday and is ready to go here for Week 16. But there's no way, in my opinion, that this Lion team should bench this kid. He's going out there, he's producing. And at this point of the season, this is what the Lions want to see, young players emerging and playing. Obviously, if Swift comes back, then it's a different story. But either way, I would go out there and get Reynolds. And right now, he's available in 87% of fantasy leagues. Week 14 at Denver, 11 carries, 83 yards, 2 catches, 16 yards. And then Week 15 versus Arizona, a huge workload, 26 carries, 112 yards, a catch and 5 yards. So Week 16, if he does have a big role once again, he's got a cupcake matchup at the Atlanta Falcons that give up the 8th most fantasy points. So right now, he's been producing. Even if Williams and Swift comes back, this guy still should have a role. But obviously, if all 3 of these backs are over there in that backfield healthy, there's no reason to start him. But he's still a player, in my opinion, I would stash, especially in Dynasty and Keeper Leagues, because next season it could be a totally different thing going on over there in Detroit, even though most likely they're going to keep Swift. The next running back's Duke Johnson of the Miami Dolphins. Yeah, the same Duke Johnson who we knew from the Cleveland Browns and the Houston Texans. So right here, he came out of nowhere, is Duke Johnson, and he had one of the best fantasy games for a running back in Week 15 here. And sometimes these guys, they come out of nowhere late in the season when teams are banged up or they're just playing for next season, even though we know the Dolphins now are back to 500 after winning 6 games in a row. So Duke Johnson in Week 15, 22 carries, 107 rush yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, a catch, and 20 yards. I know in this one, Myles Gaskin, he wasn't 100% healthy. He was fatigued after coming off the COVID list. But hey, Duke Johnson went in there, and in this ball game, he had 23 touches and was very productive, running through the tackles. And he's a guy who's hungry, who he knows this is probably his last chance in the NFL. So I assume in Week 16, he's not going to go away. I know Gaskin, he'll get more carries in this ball game, even though it's a tough matchup in New Orleans, who gives up the second least amount of fantasy points to running backs. But Duke Johnson's definitely a guy that turned heads here in Week 15, and he's worth a pickup if you need a running back, especially with all the illnesses, especially with a few good running backs going down over the last week here. And right now, he's available in 98% of fantasy leagues is Duke Johnson. The next back I look to get is Justin Jackson of the Los Angeles Chargers. So Justin Jackson here filled in a little in and out of the ball game, where Austin Eckler obviously was at 100% with his ankle injury. And now there's a mixed bag of reports that Eckler's on the COVID list or he's not on the COVID list. But Justin Jackson, we know he's a capable running back. And he had a decent workload in Week 15 where Eckler obviously, like I mentioned, wasn't 100%. 13 carries, 86 yards a catch for 13 yards. So if he's the starter, if Eckler is out with the illness, obviously, in Week 16, this guy's going to be a hot pickup and a big start, in my opinion, with a great matchup at Houston that gives up the 6th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So if you're an Eckler owner or just an owner who needs a running back, go out there and get Justin Jackson no matter what, because we don't know what the deal's going to be with Eckler. And right now, he's available in 94% of fantasy leagues. And the 5th and final running back I look to get this week on the wire is Jordan Howard of the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles ran for over 200 yards in that ball game on a Tuesday night special versus the Washington football team. And Jordan Howard, I thought he was finished coming into this year. You heard nothing about him. He didn't appear to Week 8 here for this Eagle team. And then over the last few weeks, he's been out. But he came back and he had a good ball game in Week 15. 15 carries, 69 yards. So right there in Philly, they're going to deploy pretty much a 2 running back system with Gainwell or Boston Scott in there on some third down situations. But him and Sanders had great games. Sanders rushed for over 130 yards in Week 15. And Week 16, a great matchup versus the Giants. They give up the 9th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. So I think here Jordan Howard's a decent pickup. He's available in 90% of fantasy leagues. And that's a few running backs I look to get here for Week 16 on the waiver wire of the fantasy football season.